Welcome to Chapter 10, Part 2, not Chapter 9. We just basically found out Jack is evil, okay? Elvis is hurt, the mirror got beat up, Jack stole a bunch of beans, and they still have not found Granny Relda and the giant. And Jack is apparently going to try to kill the giant on national TV. I know you can hear Benjamin. He's playing with his dad. I promise he is okay. I am not just leaving him alone in a room. Here we go. Let's jump right into it. Sabrina unlocked the door labeled Magical Armor and let the prince inside. The room was filled with all types of weapons, bows, arrows, swords, a nasty-looking pole with a spiky metal ball attached by a chain, and hundreds of others. Some things were obviously magic as they glowed or hummed, while most were shining with horrible possibilities. Charming pointed to a sword on the wall. "That's the one," he said. Mirror hobbled into the room with a worried face. "I find this very unwise. There's already one ever after running around with magic. This town does not need a second, especially with an Excalibur. Any person whose skin is pierced by its blade is a goner. Even the tiniest scratch will kill you." Sabrina took the sword off the wall and held it in her hand. It was long and wild, with a jewel-encrusted handle. An odd tingle raced through her when she held it with both hands. She felt powerful, and the way King Arthur must have felt when the Excalibur belonged to him. "Sabrina, is this someone that you can trust?" the mirror asked. "No, he's not," she said. "I've heard what this town thinks of my family and what my death might mean for your freedom. How do I know you won't just stab me in the back when I'm not looking?" "Grim, I am not your friend," Charming said. "I resent your family for the life they have forced me to live for the last 200 years, and I resent you for the future that you represent. And if I were doing this for your worthless family, you would probably be right. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. As much as Baba Yaga's spell has trapped me in Fairyport Landing, it has also benefited me. I have power here. I have wealth and respect. And if Jack shows the world that giants and fairy tales are real, then life in this town will change. And my position as its ruler, mayor, might be challenged. Therefore, you and I are in an unusual situation. Tonight, I am your ally, and I will help you save your grandmother and Canis. If that is the only solution, then so be it. But rest assured, Grim, tomorrow, I am your enemy again." So ally is when you are like someone wants the same thing as you. So you guys like agree to help each other. Sabrina looked up into his eyes and saw that he was being honest, even if his brand of honesty made her sick to her stomach. Could she trust him? She reached into her pocket, took out the picture of her family, and gazed at their faces. Her mother and father, Mr. Canis, and finally, Granny Relda. She had to do something to get the old woman back. She wasn't going to lose her family all over again. She took the heavy sword and handed it to him. Mirror continued to protest, limping along as Charming and Sabrina exited the room and returned through the mirror. Daphne was waiting for them with Elvis. They gently carried the dog into the hallway, and then Sabrina carefully locked the door to Mirror's room. "You stay here with Elvis," Sabrina ordered her sister. "No way!" Daphne cried. "We're Grimms. This is what we do." "This is very dangerous." "Whatever," the little girl said, grabbing Sabrina's hand tightly. Sabrina surrendered, hooked her finger into Charming's pocket, and clicked Dorothy's shoes together. "There's no place like where Jack is," she said. "Sabrina, wouldn't these shoes take us to wherever Mom and Dad are?" Daphne wondered aloud. Sabrina's eyes grew wide with possibilities. "You can save them next. We can save them next," her sister said happily. "All right," Sabrina said, clicking her heels together. "There's no place like where Jack is. There's no place like where Jack is." The lights went out and the familiar squeaky wheeze filled Sabrina's ears. In a split second, Charming and the girls were standing in the woods on Widow's Peak. They had little time to adjust to their new surroundings. Sabrina looked above her and saw the giant's massive foot preparing to crush them all. They managed to leap out of the way, but the aftershock tossed them around as if they were on a sinking ship. The ground split apart, sending stones and soil into a gaping crevice where the group had once stood. The giant leaned down to get a better look at the three people scurrying at his feet. He reached to snatch them, but a flaming arrow zipped through the tree line and landed on the side of the giant's face. The monster cried in pain as he plucked it from his cheek, only to have a second and third arrow pierce his chin. "Stop it, Jack," Sabrina commanded. "There are people in the giant's pockets, and if you kill him, they'll die when he falls." Jack peeked his head out from behind some branches in a nearby tree and laughed. "Oh, it's no time to kill him yet," Jack shouted, remaining safely hidden in the trees. "I'm just trying to get him good and angry." "We know about the reporters, Jack," Charming said. "We're never going to let that happen." Jack fired several more arrows in the giant's face, landing a painful shot in the monster's lower lip. The giant raged as he tried to pluck it out. While the giant was busy, the young man dropped out of the tree and landed as nimbly as a cat. "Blimey, Charming and the Grimms on the same side. I never thought I'd live to see the day," he said. "Has the prince turned traitor like the worthless mongrel Canis?" "The only allegiance I have is to myself," Charming said, as he waved Excalibur in the air, which is the sword. "Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but the result will be the same. You're going back to jail." "Sorry, Prince, but I've spent the last day in the Fairyport Landing. Lock up, my fans await," Jack said, loading another arrow into his bow and firing it at the giant. It pierced the skin between two fingers of the giant's left hand, and he shrieked. Overcome with rage, the giant swept his arm across the tops of the forest trees, cracking many ancient cedars in half. A sizable chunk of one fell from the sky and nearly hit Charming in the head. "Oh, he's angry now," the giant killer laughed, loading his arrow again. This time, he aimed it at Charming. "Jack, don't!" Sabrina cried. "I was hoping it wouldn't have to come to this," he said as he lined up his arrow with Charming's heart. "But don't worry, I promise to have them spell your name correctly on your obituary." That's like when you're dead. That's what kind of says what you died and what you did with your life. He released his arrow, and the girls watched it soar through the air at Charming. Daphne squeezed and squeezed her sister's hand, knowing Jack's aim was true. But something happened the girls didn't expect. Charming lifted the Excalibur slightly, and the arrow bounced off its metal blade and fell to the ground. Jack was flabbergasted. What a great word. He was like shocked. "What luck you have!" he cried. "Try again and see if it was luck," the prince said, stepping forward with the sword. With hands like lightning, Jack fired another arrow, and Charming deflected it with similar results. Jack pulled 3 arrows from a quill and lined them up together on his bow. He fired them all at the same time. Sabrina watched in amazement as Charming guided Excalibur to block each from every deadly course. "I can do this all night," the prince bragged, but just then the giant's monstrous hand swung down and hit him from behind. Excalibur was knocked free of his grip and fell at Sabrina's feet. Charming was sent sailing through the forest, landing painfully against a tree and slumping to the ground. Jack pulled more arrows from his quill, lit with a lighter Sabrina recognized from Granny's kitchen, and fired 5 off with furious speed. Each landed in more of the giant's sensitive spots. The painful barrage was enough to get the giant to back off, giving the young man an opportunity to turn on the girls. He put another arrow into his bow and aimed it at Sabrina. Instinctively, Sabrina reached down and snatched Excalibur from the ground. It was incredibly heavy and bulky, but she swung it in the air the best that she could. "And what do you think you're gonna do with that, little girl?" Jack scoffed, and he stepped toward her. "Grimms aren't killers. You don't have it in you." Well, we're kind of new at this job. If we break a couple of rules, that just goes with the learning process, Sabrina said, with as much bravery as she could muster. Her courage was short-lived. As Jack got closer, she noticed something painted on his shirt. It was a red hand, just like the one that the police had found in her parents' abandoned car. It sent a chill through her body. "You took my parents," Sabrina said. Jack looked down at the red hand and smiled. "No, girl, I didn't, but I know who did. The Scarlet Hand has plans for them." "Where are they?" Daphne cried. He laughed. "You know, I grew up reading about you," Sabrina said, trying to keep him busy. "You had a very exciting story. You climbed the beanstalk, killed the giant, and captured the treasure. Lots of kids think of you as a hero, but not you." "Once, but not now. Now that I've met you, the real Jack, I see what a rotten person you are. That's what you're famous for now, Jack. Not being a giant killer, but being scum." "Give me the sword, girl, so I can cut your tongue out of it," he threatened. "Daphne, I want you to run away and get some help," Sabrina said. She knew she couldn't deflect Jack's arrows and didn't want her sister to see her die. "I won't do it," Daphne insisted. Jack pulled his bowstring back further, and just as he was about to fire his arrow, the giant's foot came down on top of him, giving the man only a split second to leap out of the way. Daphne grabbed her sister's hand, and together they raced into the forest, dodging trees and branches. Jack followed closely behind, and worse, the giant strode after him. Its first step landed several yards behind them. An arrow whizzed by and impaled itself into a nearby tree. "That was a warning shot, ladies," the young man shouted as he loaded another arrow. "I'm quite good with this thing." Suddenly, the two girls were slipping down the side of a hill and into an ice-cold creek. Another arrow splashed into the water at Sabrina's feet as they pulled themselves out of the stream and continued to run. With now frozen feet, they did their best to avoid the jagged rocks that littered the forest floor. But soon, Sabrina took a tumble and fell end over the ground. She tried to stand up and quickly realized she was missing something. Her left shoe, Dorothy's left slipper, lay glistening in the moonlight behind her. It had fallen off. "Come on!" Daphne begged as she tried to help her big sister to her feet. But Sabrina crawled desperately towards the shoe. It was their only chance of finding their parents. She used her arm to pull herself along the ground, knowing that Jack would fall upon her at any second. But before she could reach it, the giant's foot came down hard on top of the slipper. That vibration shook the girls and sent them tumbling. When the giant lifted his foot, the shoe was gone. The only thing remaining was a piece of glistening fabric that turned to dust in Sabrina's outstretched hand. Heartbroken, Sabrina pulled her sister behind a huge oak tree, and the two of them rested. "Don't worry, I'll think of something," she said, squeezing her sister's hand. But the sound of a monstrous crash drowned Sabrina's answer and flooded the forest. Splintering wood and damp soil rained from the sky as the tree stood next to was violently uprooted. The two girls looked up into the face of death towering above them and felt its hot, pungent breath blow their back from their scalps. "What's happened to our lives?" Sabrina wondered. The giant tossed the tree aside and then reached down with his grubby hand to pick them up. But just as he did, Sabrina thrust Excalibur into the air. The giant's hand plunged into the blade, and suddenly his eyes lit up in surprise. "What was that?" he asked softly. He stood up as if it was in a daze, unsure of where he was. The anger in his face melted away, replaced by a sort of calm curiosity, and began to wobble on his feet. Unable to keep his balance, he sailed backward, landing flat on his back and crashing an acre of forest beneath him. A thick cloud of dust rose above his body and settled down all around them. A half-pound of soil landed in Sabrina's blonde hair. And then all was still. I didn't mean for that to happen, Sabrina said, looking in horror as the sword still clutched in her hand. Granny Relda and Mr. Canis? Daphne whispered as tears filled her eyes. Jack rushed through the brush and saw the giant lying dead on the ground. You've killed him, he said angrily. I was going to kill him. It's over, Jack, Sabrina said. It's not over until I say it's over, Jack raged. I'm going to be the famous again, but for another reason. Tonight, the ever-afters of Fairyport Landing are going to find that they are suddenly free from the spell that has kept them in this mercilessly boring town for 2 centuries. With your grandmum now dead, the spell turns into the last living Grimm. Some might be patient enough to wait for you two to die of old age, but I am not. This ends tonight. Whew. Oh my word. Okay, so Sabrina just killed a giant. She has no idea what's happening to Mr. Canis and her grandmother. They think that she's dead. Prince Charming is somewhere off by a tree, hurt. And Jack wants to kill Sabrina and Daphne. Guys, we're on the last chapter. I don't know what's going to happen, but there is only one way to find out. We cannot stop now, except we have to stop because the video is now done. But look at this. Chapter 11, our very last chapter. And if I don't know who this is, but look, could those be pixies? What do you think? Do you think that that's Jack? Or do you think that it's Puck? I don't know, but we are almost done. Okay, guys, you know the deal. Come back next time. Let's see how this story ends. Bye.